Just a guest. I slammed my fist on the kitchen counter. 12 years as her father, and I'm just a goddamn guest? Karen's voice crackled through the phone. It was Emma's decision. Michael, don't make this difficult. I glared at the cream-colored wedding invitation, those 3 words burning into my vision. Mr. Michael Donovan and guest. Not father of the bride. Just another name on the list between co-workers and distant relatives. The kitchen phone shattered the silence. Karen's number, my ex-wife and Emma's mother. Did you get it? She asked, her voice carrying an unmistakable hint of satisfaction. Yeah, I managed, my throat constricting. I got it. Look, Michael, I know what you're thinking, do you? The words shot out like bullets. 12 years, Karen. 12 years I've been her dad. I paid for her braces. I taught her to drive. I emptied my 401k for her college tuition. This is Emma's decision, Karen said coldly. She wants Richard to walk her down the aisle. Richard, her biological father who'd vanished when Emma was 4, who'd sent maybe 3 birthday cards in her entire childhood, who'd suddenly reappeared 2 years ago with a new wife, new money, and apparently a renewed interest in playing daddy. He hasn't earned it, I said, my knuckles white around the phone. It's not about earning, Karen replied, her voice hardening. It's about blood. He's her real father. The word real hit me like a physical blow. Before I could respond, Karen continued as if she hadn't just shattered my world. The rehearsal dinner is Friday at 7. Emma really hopes you'll be there. I hung up without answering. Walking to my desk, I pulled out my checkbook and stared at the wedding gift check I'd written earlier that morning. $20,000, nearly everything I had left after paying for her education. Without hesitation, I tore it in half, then reached for my laptop. With a few decisive clicks, I opened my banking app and transferred the remaining wedding fund money back into my account. My hands hovered over the keyboard as a cold determination took shape. I had never expected repayment for raising Emma, but I never expected this betrayal either. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Kevin stood there, my old college roommate and the only friend who'd really stuck around after the divorce. You look like shit, he said, stepping inside. Bad morning. I handed him the invitation without a word. He read it, his expression darkening. Just a guest? That's cold, man. Richard's walking her down the aisle, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. Kevin shook his head. The same Richard who hasn't done shit for her entire life? That's messed up. I returned to my laptop, Kevin looking over my shoulder. What are you doing? He asked as I navigated through my accounts. Something I should have done a long time ago, I replied, setting up another transfer. I'm done being used. As the confirmation appeared on screen, the doorbell rang again. I exchanged a quick glance with Kevin before opening the door. Emma stood on my porch, her eyes red-rimmed but chin raised defiantly. At 20, she looked so much like her mother, beautiful and uncompromising. Her gaze flicked to the torn check visible on the coffee table, and her face paled. Can we talk? She asked, her voice small but with an undertone of challenge that made my blood boil. I stepped aside to let her in, noticing Kevin making a discreet exit to my back patio. Emma's eyes fell on the torn check on the coffee table, and her face paled. I guess Mom called you, she said, her voice small. She did. I couldn't bring myself to say more. Emma sat on the couch, twisting her new engagement ring, a diamond far larger than I could have ever afforded to give her mother. I know you're upset about the invitation, but you're still invited to the wedding. You're important to me. Just not important enough to be your father anymore, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. It's complicated. Dad, she stopped, seeming to catch herself. Michael. The deliberate correction was like a knife to my heart. It's not complicated, Emma. It's actually very simple. Richard has money now, and suddenly he's dad. I'm just the sucker who raised you and paid for everything when he couldn't be bothered. That's not fair, she protested, tears welling in her eyes. Isn't it? Tell me what part is inaccurate. She had no answer for that. Instead, she switched tactics. Richard offered to pay for the whole wedding. It's going to be at Overlook Manor. The dress alone costs, so this is about money. I interrupted. I empty my retirement account for your education, but Richard buys you a fancy wedding and gets to be daddy again? Her silence was damning. You know what hurts the most? I continued, emotion thickening my voice. It's not that you chose him. It's that you think what I did. All these years of being your father when he wasn't around meant so little that you could just replace me when a better option came along. Emma wiped at her tears, her mascara smearing. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations on failing spectacularly at that. I walked to the window, trying to compose myself before turning back to her. The money I transferred to your wedding account this morning, I've moved it back. You have Richard now. Let him pay for everything. Her eyes widened. But you promised, and you promised to dance with me at your wedding when you were 12? I cut in. You said I was the best dad in the world, and you'd always want me to be there for your special moments. Promises get broken, Emma. You've taught me that. She stood now, anger replacing her tears. So that's it. You're punishing me because I want my biological father at my wedding? No, I'm respecting your choice. You've made it clear where I stand. You're an adult now, and these are the consequences of your decisions. Emma's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down, then back at me with renewed determination. Richard and his wife are picking me up. We're going to look at flowers for the ceremony. She moved toward the door, then hesitated. I still want you at the wedding. I've saved you a seat in the front row. How generous, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. The front row. I can watch from 5 feet away while another man gets to be your father. You're making this so difficult, she said, her hand on the doorknob. No, Emma. You made it difficult when you decided that 12 years of love and sacrifice could be discarded for a man who's playing daddy with his new money. Through the window, I saw a sleek black Mercedes pull into my driveway. Richard stepped out, his designer suit probably costing more than my monthly mortgage payment. The young blonde beside him, his new wife, barely older than Emma, adjusted her sunglasses and checked her phone. Your ride's here, I said flatly. Emma gave me one last pleading look before walking out. Through the open door, I could see Richard's broad smile as he embraced her. He glanced at my modest house, then at me still standing in the doorway. Our eyes met, and there was something in his expression, a smirk of victory that made my blood boil. As they drove away, Kevin returned from the patio. You okay? He asked, though we both knew the answer. No, I admitted. But I will be. The week passed in a blur of anger and grief. I kept expecting Emma to call, to apologize, to realize what she was throwing away. She didn't. By Friday, I decided not to attend the rehearsal dinner. I texted Karen to let her know, receiving only a terse, Emma will be disappointed in response. Instead, I found myself pulling a dusty box from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were 12 years of memories, Emma's school photos, handmade Father's Day cards, the world's best dad mug she'd given me our first Christmas together. At the bottom, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was a letter she'd written during her freshman year of college. I'd read it so many times that the creases were beginning to tear. I unfolded it again now, my eyes tracing her familiar handwriting. Dear Dad, I know I don't say it enough, but thank you. Thank you for choosing to love me when you didn't have to. Thank you for being there for every important moment in my life. Thank you for working those extra shifts so I could go to dance camp, for staying up late helping with science projects, for teaching me to parallel park even though it terrified both of us. Most of all, thank you for showing me what a real father is, someone who shows up, who stays, who loves unconditionally. I know I'm not your biological daughter, but in all the ways that matter, I am 100% your kid. I promise that someday, when I get married, you'll be the one to walk me down the aisle. Because you earned that right, one day at a time, for all these years. I love you more than words can say. Emma, the doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I quickly wiped my eyes before answering. Brian, Emma's younger half-brother, stood on my porch. At 16, he looked so much like his father, like me, that sometimes people mistook us for biological father and son. Hey, he said awkwardly. Can I come in? I stepped aside, surprised. Brian had been staying with his mother since the divorce, though he spent most weekends with me. Shouldn't you be at the rehearsal dinner? I asked as he slumped onto the couch. I told Mom I was sick. He fidgeted with the strings of his hoodie. This whole thing sucks. I sat beside him, unsure what to say. Emma's being stupid, he continued. Everyone knows you're her real dad. Richard's just some guy with money who showed up when all the hard work was done. Despite everything, I felt a need to be the adult. It's complicated, buddy. Richard is her biological father. So what? Brian scoffed. Biology didn't help her with calculus or teach her to drive or scare away that loser boyfriend she had in high school. You did all that. I couldn't help but smile at his fierce loyalty. I appreciate that. Brian hesitated, then reached into his backpack. I thought you should see this. He handed me his phone, opened to Emma's Instagram account. The most recent post showed Emma, Karen, Richard, and his young wife posing in front of an expensive restaurant. The caption read, "Family dinner with the parents. So blessed to have dad back in my life for this special time. Hashtag wedding planning, hashtag family, hashtag blessed." The photo had been posted 30 minutes ago. The rehearsal dinner I wasn't invited to attend. Brian watched my face carefully. There's more. Scroll down. I swiped through several more posts, each more painful than the last. Emma and Richard shopping for her dress. Emma and Richard visiting the venue. Emma and Richard tasting cakes. In each photo, they looked like the perfect father-daughter pair, as if the past 12 years hadn't happened. "She deleted all the old photos of you guys," Brian said quietly. "Like she's erasing you." I handed the phone back, a cold determination settling over me. "Thank you for showing me." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to respect her choice," I said, standing up. "And I'm going to make one of my own." Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the wedding invitation. The ceremony would start in 3 hours. My suit hung pressed and ready in the closet, a decision I'd been wrestling with all night. The doorbell rang again. It had been ringing a lot lately. This time, it was Karen. "You're not dressed," she observed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She looked elegant in a blue dress, her hair and makeup already done for the wedding. "I'm not going," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. Karen's expression hardened. "Don't be childish, Michael. Emma wants you there. As a guest, not as her father." She sighed, sitting across from me. "Look, I know this is hard, but Richard is her biological father." "Yes, I've heard the speech." I set my cup down carefully. "What I don't understand is why you're supporting this. You were there when he left. You saw what it did to her." Karen had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Richard has changed. He's successful now, stable. So this is about money?" "Of course not," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "It's about Emma having a relationship with her real father." "Why now? Why not when she needed braces and you couldn't afford them? Or when she was applying to colleges and needed tuition money? Where was her real father then?" Karen stood up, smoothing her dress. "I didn't come here to argue. I came to convince you to be at your daughter's wedding. She's made it clear I'm not her father anymore. You're being dramatic. Just because Richard is walking her down the aisle. It's not just that." I finally raised my voice. "It's everything. It's Emma erasing me from her social media. It's her calling me Michael instead of Dad. It's her making space for a man who abandoned her while pushing away the one who stayed." Karen's phone chimed with a text. She glanced at it, then back at me. "Emma's asking if you're coming." Her voice softened slightly. "Please, Michael, don't make this day any harder for her." The irony almost made me laugh. Harder for her? What about what's hard for me? Watching another man play the role I earned through 12 years of actually being there? Karen shook her head, heading for the door. "The ceremony starts at 11. I hope you'll reconsider." After she left, I sat in silence for a long time. Eventually, I reached for the letter from Emma, reading it once more before placing it in an envelope along with a note of my own. At 10:30, I made my decision. I showered, dressed in my suit, and drove to Overlook Manor. The venue was spectacular, with panoramic views of the city and mountains beyond. Luxury cars filled the parking lot, Richard's crowd, no doubt. Inside, I was directed to the ceremony space, already filling with guests. I spotted Karen near the front, speaking with Richard's new wife. She looked surprised to see me but gave a relieved nod. I didn't take my assigned seat in the front row. Instead, I approached one of the wedding coordinators. "Could you make sure the bride gets this before the ceremony?" I asked, handing over the envelope. Then I turned and walked back to my car. Emma found me in the venue's garden, staring out at the view of Mount Hood in the distance. She was breathtaking in her wedding dress, her hair swept up elegantly. "You're leaving?" she asked, the envelope clutched in her hand. I turned to face her. "I read your letter again, the one from college." Her eyes fell to the ground. "I meant it when I wrote it." "I know you did. That's what makes this so hard." We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of arriving guests and distant music floating around us. "I never meant to hurt you," she finally said. "But you did," I replied simply. "You made a choice, Emma. And now I'm making mine. By not coming to my wedding? That's petty. No, it's self-respect. I won't sit and watch while you pretend the last 12 years didn't happen. I won't be relegated to guest status by a daughter I raised, loved, and sacrificed for." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing anymore," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. I've given you everything I had to give, my time, my love, my financial security. Now Richard can take over. It's not like that, she protested. It's exactly like that. And you know what? That's your right. You're an adult. You get to choose who walks you down the aisle. I took a deep breath. But I get to choose too. And I choose not to pretend I'm okay with being erased. A wedding coordinator appeared at the garden entrance. Ms. Reynolds? Everyone's ready. Your father's waiting to walk you down the aisle. Emma flinched at the coordinator's words. She looked at me one last time, perhaps hoping I'd change my mind. Goodbye, Emma, I said quietly. I wish you happiness in your new life with your new family. She opened her mouth as if to say something more, then closed it. With a small nod, she turned and walked away, the train of her white dress trailing behind her. I waited until she was gone before returning to my car. As I drove away from Overlook Manor, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I had lost a daughter today, or perhaps I had lost her long before, when Richard reappeared with his money and grand gestures. But I had also reclaimed something important, my dignity, my self-worth, the knowledge that love shouldn't be conditional or easily replaced. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. She's really doing it. Walking with Richard. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I drove home, changed out of my suit, and booked a flight to Costa Rica, a trip I'd always wanted to take but had put off to pay for Emma's education. It was time to start living for myself again. As I packed my suitcase, I caught sight of the world's best dad mug on my desk. After a moment's hesitation, I wrapped it carefully and placed it in a box with Emma's other childhood mementos. Perhaps someday she would want them back. Perhaps not. Either way, I was done waiting for approval or recognition from a family that had decided I was disposable. 12 years of being a father had taught me many things, but today had taught me the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to walk away. Should I have stayed for the wedding despite the pain? Was I right to choose self-respect over playing along with their version of family? Sometimes I wonder if making that stand was worth losing her completely, but then I remember how easily I was replaced once Richard showed up with his money and grand gestures. What would you have done in my place?